Hi, guys. Today, we're taking a moment to honor the beloved cast of ER. They once pulled us into the chaotic, heart-pounding world of Chicago's County General Hospital. But behind those roles, they faced some of life's harshest realities. From shocking career collapses to massive business fortunes, their journeys will truly surprise you in this video. Noah Wyle as Dr. John Carter. Noah Wyle was born on June 4, 1971 in Los Angeles, California. At 23 years old, he played Dr. John Carter, the idealistic young doctor who slowly hardened through trauma in ER. His character became the emotional spine of the show, the one viewers grew up with and never forgot. But while Carter was saving lives on screen, Noah's own marriage was quietly falling apart. He married makeup artist Tracy Warbin in 2000, built a family with 2 children, yet the fame from ER and later projects like Falling Skies kept pulling him further from home. By 2009, they separated after nearly a decade together, not because of scandal, but because the relationship had simply worn down under years of distance and pressure. He later found stability again with actress Sarah Wells, but that first collapse left a mark he rarely spoke about. Then came the hidden cost no one saw. Appearing in 254 episodes meant years of emotional strain, carrying scenes of death, addiction, and loss almost daily. Wyle admitted he felt drained and disconnected, stepping away from ER at the height of fame just to hold himself together. Even during The Librarians, he chose lighter roles, a clear sign he was avoiding the intensity that once defined him. By 2026, Noah Wyle is 55 years old and has stunned audiences again with The Pit, earning his first Emmy after decades in the industry. With an estimated net worth of $25 million, he now stands not just as a former TV icon, but as someone who survived the pressure that nearly broke him. Laura Innes as Dr. Carrie Weaver. Laura Innes was born on August 16, 1957, in Pontiac, Michigan. At 38 years old, she played Dr. Carrie Weaver, the strict, intimidating ER chief with a visible disability in ER. Her performance added tension and authority to the series, turning her into one of its most unforgettable figures. But behind that controlled image was a life marked by sudden tragedy. Her fiancé, actor David Bell, was murdered in 1980, a brutal loss that shattered her world overnight. She eventually rebuilt her life and married actor David Brisbane in 1988, raising a family together. Yet the shadow of that past never fully disappeared. Even while working on ER and later directing episodes of The West Wing, she carried a quiet, emotional weight that shaped the intensity people saw on screen. Then the role itself began to take something from her body. For nearly a decade, Innes forced her posture into an unnatural limp to portray Weaver, and over time, it stopped being acting. Her spine began to curve, causing real damage that required the show to rewrite her condition. Even as she moved into projects like How to Get Away with Murder, she was dealing with the consequences of a role that had physically altered her. By 2026, Laura Innes is 69 years old and still working steadily as both an actress and director. With an estimated net worth of $5 million, her career stands as proof of endurance, built not on comfort, but on surviving loss, pain, and the quiet sacrifices behind the camera. Maura Tierney as Dr. Abby Lockhart. Maura Tierney was born on February 3, 1965, in Boston, Massachusetts. At 34 years old, she played Dr. Abby Lockhart, the emotionally fragile yet resilient nurse who fought her way into becoming a doctor in ER. Her performance quickly stood out for its raw intensity, turning Abby into one of the most human and unpredictable characters in the entire series. Her journey into that role was far from smooth. After building recognition through news radio and films like Primal Fear and Liar Liar, Maura initially stepped into ER as a minor character, only to be written out unexpectedly. That early rejection planted a quiet doubt in her, but when she returned and was given Abby's storyline, especially alongside Sally Field as her bipolar mother. It became the turning point that reshaped her entire career. The more broken Abby became on screen, the more Maura leaned into that emotional depth, almost as if she was channeling something personal she had not yet fully confronted. That intensity carried into her personal life, where things were quietly falling apart. She had married Billy Morissette in 1993, and for years they appeared stable, even collaborating professionally in Scotland, Pennsylvania. But behind that creative partnership, distance and unspoken strain grew over time. By 2006, their marriage ended in divorce, not through scandal, but through a slow emotional disconnect that left Maura isolated just as her career was shifting direction. Then, just as she was trying to rebuild, everything stopped. In 2009, Maura was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent surgery to remove a tumor, followed by intense treatment that forced her to step away from acting entirely. She lost a leading role in Parenthood, vanished from the screen, and faced a reality far more frightening than anything she had portrayed. That period became a defining chapter of her life. When she returned, it was different. In the affair, the pain, restraint, and emotional weight she brought to Helen Soloway earned her a Golden Globe, and later roles like Your Honor and The Iron Claw showed an actress who had lived through something real. By 2026, Maura Tierney is 61 years old and continues to work steadily, carrying a quiet strength that cannot be faked. With an estimated net worth of around $15 million, her story is no longer just about success, but about endurance, loss, and the ability to come back when everything once fell apart. Goran Visnjic as Dr. Luka Kovac. Goran Visnjic was born on September 9, 1972, in Šibenik, Croatia. At 27 years old, he played Dr. Luka Kovac, the quiet, grieving doctor who brought a darker emotional depth to ER after George Clooney's departure. His presence shifted the tone of the series, introducing a character shaped by loss and silence rather than charm. That sense of loss was not fictional. Goran came from a country torn apart by war, serving in the Croatian army as a young man and witnessing a level of violence that never fully left him. When he moved to the United States and built his career through films like Practical Magic and Welcome to Sarajevo, he carried those memories with him. So when Luka spoke about losing his family in ER, it resonated differently. It felt real, because for Goran, grief was not something he had to imagine. His personal life, however, seemed to offer stability. He married artist Ivana Verdoljak in 1994, and together they built a family with 3 children. For years, they were seen as one of the rare, lasting marriages in Hollywood. But in 2006, a revelation shook that image. Goran had fathered a child with another woman, Mirela Rupic. The situation forced him into a public acknowledgement that threatened everything he had built, exposing a private fracture that could not be hidden. Despite that, his family did not collapse. Instead, they endured, quietly rebuilding away from public attention while Goran continued his career in projects like Timeless, The Boys, and Doctor Who. Yet even as his professional life expanded, there was always an underlying intensity in his performances. By 2026, Goran Visnjic is 54 years old and continues to work across international productions while living a more private life in Europe. With an estimated net worth of around $10 million, his story stands apart, not because it is louder, but because it is heavier, shaped by war, controversy, and a life that has always been more complex than it first appeared. Anthony Edwards as Dr. Mark Green. Anthony Edwards was born on July 19, 1962, in Santa Barbara, California. At 32 years old, he played Dr. Mark Green, the steady, compassionate leader of the ER in ER. His role grounded the entire series, becoming the heart that held every storyline together. That stability on screen came at a cost off-screen. Edwards married Jeanine Lobel in 1994 and built a family with 4 children. But the weight of ER, 182 episodes, endless responsibility as the show's anchor, slowly drained him. While appearing in films like Zodiac and Thunderbirds, he was also making a painful decision behind the scenes: to walk away from the biggest role of his life in 2002. It wasn't about money. He had already earned tens of millions. It was about exhaustion, about choosing his children before they grew up without him. Then, years later, another truth surfaced, one far darker. In 2017, Edwards publicly revealed he had been sexually abused as a child by a powerful Hollywood figure, a secret he had carried for decades. That revelation reframed everything: his quiet nature, his intensity, even the emotional depth he brought to Dr. Green. But life did not end there. After divorcing Jeanine in 2015, he eventually found love again with actress Mare Winningham, marrying her in 2021 in a quiet, almost private escape from Hollywood noise. By 2026, Anthony Edwards is 64 years old, still acting and directing with a calmer presence, his career now shaped more by choice than pressure. With an estimated net worth of around $15 million, he stands as a man who stepped away from fame at its peak and faced truths far heavier than any role he ever played. Eriq La Salle as Dr. Peter Benton. Eriq La Salle was born on July 23, 1962, in Hartford, Connecticut. At 32 years old, he played Dr. Peter Benton, the intense, ambitious surgeon in ER. His performance brought discipline, conflict, and representation to the series, making Benton one of its most complex and groundbreaking characters. But the intensity people saw on screen was rooted in something deeper. Growing up in a racially divided environment, La Salle had already learned what it meant to fight for space and respect. When he stepped into ER, he didn't just act. He challenged the writing itself, even pushing back against how interracial relationships were portrayed. At the same time, while appearing in projects like Coming to America and later Logan, he was carrying the burden of being one of the few black leads expected to represent more than just a character. That pressure followed him through the years on the show. Benton's cold exterior, emotional restraint, and constant need to prove himself mirrored a reality La Salle knew too well. He later admitted that maintaining that level of intensity was mentally exhausting. It pushed him to step away from acting's spotlight earlier than expected because he refused to be trapped by it. And instead of fading, he changed direction. La Salle moved behind the camera, directing major series like Law and Order, CSI, and Chicago PD, quietly building a second career that many never saw coming. By 2026, he is 64 years old and respected as both an actor and director, with an estimated net worth of around $8 million. His story is not about burnout. It's about control, about stepping away before the system could define him, and rewriting his place in it on his own terms. Alex Kingston as Dr. Elizabeth Corday. Alex Kingston was born on March 11, 1963, in Epsom, Surrey, England. At 34 years old, she played Dr. Elizabeth Corday, the brilliant British surgeon who brought elegance, steel, and emotional complexity to ER. Her arrival changed the energy of the show. Then her real life turned darker than many fans ever realized. Kingston had been with Ralph Fiennes for about a decade before they married in 1993, but the marriage collapsed after his affair with Francesca Annis. The humiliation was public, sudden, and brutal, and Kingston later admitted that after the breakup she spiraled so badly she came close to ending her life. That is part of why her emotional work in ER felt so raw. That heartbreak did not stay neatly in the past. She rebuilt her life and married German writer Florian Hertel after a blind date, and they had a daughter, Salome, in 2001. But even that second chapter did not last. They separated in 2009, and the divorce was finalized in 2013. So when audiences watched Kingston move from ER into Doctor Who as River Song and later into a discovery of witches, what they were really seeing was a woman who kept rebuilding herself each time her private world cracked apart. And then came another shock. Kingston revealed in 2025 that she had been diagnosed with uterine cancer in 2024 after ignoring warning signs for too long, including a frightening hemorrhage while on stage. She underwent a hysterectomy and radiation therapy, and later said the diagnosis forced her to confront mortality in a way she never had before. That health crisis also changed how people saw her 2025 Strictly Come Dancing run. By 2026, Alex Kingston is 63 years old and still deeply loved, not only for ER but for River Song, A Discovery of Witches, and her stage work with the Royal Shakespeare Company. She returned to major TV work in Douglas is Cancelled, competed on Strictly Come Dancing in 2025, and has spoken openly after cancer treatment, which only made her story feel even more hard-won. Public wealth estimates vary, but widely circulated figures often place her net worth at around $6 million. Sherry Stringfield, as Dr. Susan Lewis. Sherry Stringfield was born on June 24, 1967, in Colorado Springs, Colorado. At 27 years old, she played Dr. Susan Lewis, the gifted, grounded doctor whose quiet strength made her one of the most relatable faces in ER. Her performance gave the show warmth and realism, which is exactly why her early exit shocked Hollywood so badly. Stringfield was contractually tied to 5 seasons, yet she quit during season 3 because she wanted an ordinary life more than non-stop fame. The fallout was ugly. Getting out of the contract took time. The producers were furious, and she even had to accept a no-work agreement that kept her off television for the rest of that original deal. She did not just leave a hit show, she walked away from a fortune and from one of television's hottest rising careers. That need for a quieter life also echoed through her relationships. In the early 1990s, she had a long-distance romance with British businessman Paul Goldstein, but distance slowly killed it. She later married journalist Larry Joseph in 1998, and they built a family with 2 children, Phoebe and Milo. Yet by 2006, that marriage had ended too. Unlike some of her ER co-stars, Stringfield is not known for a headline-grabbing illness, but the strain in her story came from another place: burnout, pressure, and the emotional cost of choosing peace over ambition again and again. After leaving ER, she moved through projects like 54, Autumn in New York, Law and Order, and Criminal Minds. Beyond Borders, yet none of those jobs carried the same gravity as the choice she made in the 1990s, protecting her own life even when Hollywood treated that decision like a betrayal. By 2026, Sherry Stringfield is 59 years old and remains one of the most intriguing ER stories because she never followed the career path people expected. In recent years, she has kept a much lower public profile, with her legacy still tied most strongly to Dr. Susan Lewis and to the rare courage it took to leave a phenomenon on her own terms. Public estimates commonly place her net worth around $6 million, but the more surprising truth is that her reputation was built as much on what she refused to do as on the roles she accepted. Abraham Benrubi as Jerry Markovich. Abraham Benrubi was born on October 4, 1969, in Indianapolis, Indiana. At about 25 years old, he played Jerry Markovich, the loud, lovable desk clerk who brought relief and warmth to ER. That mattered more than it sounds, because in a series filled with death, panic, and grief, Jerry was often the one character who reminded viewers that life inside that hospital had not completely lost its humor. But that easy charm hit a harder road than many people realized. Standing around 6 feet 7 inches tall, Benrubi did not fit the usual mold for Hollywood, and that physical difference shaped the way people saw him from the start. He was memorable, yes, but he also risked being reduced to the big funny guy instead of a full actor. That pressure followed him from early work like Parker Lewis, Can't Lose into ER, where he had to keep making a supporting role feel human, funny, and alive without letting it slip into caricature. That was the strange tension at the center of his career. On ER, he was asked to play comic relief inside one of television's darkest dramas, which is much harder than it looks. When he moved into projects like Men in Trees and films like Without a Paddle and Open Range, it became clear that he had more range than people first assumed. But ER had already stamped him into the audience's memory in a very specific way. His private life, meanwhile, stayed unusually guarded. There are no headline-heavy marriage scandals attached to Benrubi, and that silence says something of its own. In an industry that often rewards noise, he built a reputation around steadiness, friendships, and long-term work, including voice acting on Robot Chicken and major video game titles such as World of Warcraft. That quieter path may not have generated tabloid drama, but it also kept his career intact while louder names rose and fell around him. By 2026, Abraham Benrubi is 56 years old and still working steadily across film, television, and voice acting. He remains one of those rare performers audiences instantly recognize, even if they do not always know his name, and that kind of longevity is its own victory. With an estimated net worth of around $4 million, Benrubi's story is not built on scandal or collapse, but on persistence. Julianna Margulies as Carol Hathaway. Julianna Margulies was born on June 8, 1966, in Spring Valley, New York. At 28 years old, she played Carol Hathaway, the ER nurse whose near-death opening storyline almost ended before it began. Instead, the audience response saved Carol, and that single twist changed the fate of both the character and the show, because Carol quickly became one of the most beloved women on television. That emotional force did not come from nowhere. Margulies grew up in a home shaped by divorce, constant moving, and a childhood she later described as loving but unstable. That instability gave her something unusual on screen. It felt lived in. That truth helped turn ER into more than a fast-paced hospital drama, and it made Margulies indispensable almost overnight. Then came the decision that stunned Hollywood. After 6 successful years on ER, NBC reportedly offered Margulies $27 million to stay, a number that could have locked in security and status for years. She still walked away. The choice shocked people because it looked irrational from the outside, but to Margulies, it was about protecting the character and protecting herself. She had already started feeling that Carol was being pushed into weaker romantic material, and she refused to stay just to become richer, while the role she loved slowly thinned out. That kind of decision cost her goodwill in some circles, but it also revealed how fiercely she valued integrity over money. Her personal life carried its own ache before she found peace. She was in a long relationship with actor Ron Eldard from 1991 to 2003, and although they seemed deeply connected, it eventually ended without turning into the future many expected for them. Years later, she found lasting stability with attorney Keith Lieberthal, whom she married in 2007, and together they built a family with their son, Kieran. By then, Margulies had already transformed herself again through The Good Wife, turning Alicia Florrick into another defining role and proving that leaving ER had not been career suicide at all. It had been a risk that paid off. By 2026, Julianna Margulies is 60 years old and remains one of the most respected actresses of her generation. Her career now stretches from ER to The Good Wife, The Morning Show, and stage work in New York, and she still carries the authority of someone who made difficult choices and survived them. With an estimated net worth of around $30 million, Margulies stands as more than a television star. She is proof that sometimes the boldest move in Hollywood is walking away at the exact moment everyone expects you to stay. George Clooney as Dr. Doug Ross. George Clooney was born on May 6, 1961 in Lexington, Kentucky. At 33 years old, He played Dr. Doug Ross, the reckless, charismatic pediatrician who gave ER much of its danger, charm, and emotional heat. Doug Ross was not just handsome or popular. His restless energy helped turn ER into a cultural phenomenon. What made that breakthrough even more dramatic was how long Clooney had struggled before it happened. He had spent years drifting through small roles, failed shows, and odd jobs, carrying the pressure of coming from a famous family while still not becoming a star himself. Then ER arrived, and suddenly everything changed. But success came with a brutal pace. The show was massive, the schedule was punishing, and while Clooney was filming ER, he was also trying to launch a film career through titles like From Dusk Till Dawn, Out of Sight, and Three Kings. That double life pushed him hard and helped explain why his rise looked glamorous from the outside but exhausting from within. His love life was no less turbulent. Clooney married actress Talia Balsam in 1989, but the marriage ended in divorce in 1993, just before his ER fame exploded. After that, he became famous almost as much for his string of relationships as for his acting, moving through years of high-profile romances while joking that he would never marry again. That image lasted until Amal Clooney entered his life and changed the story completely. Their 2014 marriage gave him something his earlier years never seemed to provide. Then there was the pain people could not always see. Clooney had suffered Bell's palsy as a boy, an ordeal that left half his face temporarily paralyzed at the worst possible age, and he later faced a far more serious health scare after injuring himself on the set of Syriana, an accident that caused a brain-related complication and chronic pain. In 2018, he was also badly hurt in a motorcycle crash in Italy, with injuries serious enough to remind people that even someone as polished as Clooney was not invincible. Yet he kept moving, directing films like Good Night and Good Luck and The Boys in the Boat, acting in Gravity, Ticket to Paradise, and Wolves. By 2026, George Clooney is 65 years old and still one of the most recognizable stars in the world. He remains active as an actor, director, producer, and public advocate, while also raising twins with Amal and spending more of his life between Europe and France. He earned an estimated net worth of around $500 million. So, that was the cast of ER, 1994 versus 2026. Then and now, and after all these years, their lives turned out to be just as dramatic as anything that happened inside County General. Which ER star shocked you the most? And who do you still remember best from the show? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more Then and Now stories.